Hello and welcome back to this series of videos on learning support for autistic children and young people. And thank you for visiting the North Somerset Educational Psychology Service Training Library. Today we're going to look at some practical top tips for learning support, and in particular we're going to focus on how we can create autism-aware or autism-friendly learning environments in our primary schools. If you enjoyed this video, please also watch our video on useful daily and weekly activities that you can use to develop skills for learning in students with social communication difficulties and autism. Also, don't forget to check out our resources page at the EPS Training Library, which features links to all the resources we mention here, plus examples of further training. First, let's start with a quick reminder of some of the best practice guidelines for supporting autistic young people in our settings. In particular, we want to provide visual learning environments, clear instructions, and predictable routines. So, what changes can we make to our primary school classrooms to achieve this? Well, we can start by thinking about how we create highly visual learning environments. This means environments which use consistent visual symbols to label different areas in the classroom, to mark out hazards, to remind young people about the rules, and to prepare them for upcoming activities. One really important example of this is using visual timetables and now our next boards, which help children predict and remember the daily routines. When children with social communication difficulties get used to their visual timetables, we will often see that they seek them out as a source of comfort when they're feeling unsure. We can also use and display social stories, which are like cartoon strip, picture-heavy stories that explain important rules and expectations, for example depicting what it looks like when we all sit down for circle time or how we ask for help when we need it. Social stories can be adapted to fit any situation in a young person's life. There are lots of pre-written social stories available online. There are also free online tools which we can use to create our own personalized social stories. Displaying these social stories on walls helps many autistic students learn and remember even better than hearing us repeat rules and expectations out loud. Secondly, we need to ensure that learning environments for autistic young people do not overwhelm their senses. Sensory processing difficulties are extremely common in people with social communication difficulties, and we need to avoid challenging their senses of sight, hearing, and touch with too many changes in the environment. Changes in lighting, unexpected noises, and unfamiliar textures often cause distractions, distress, and even a sense of physical pain for autistic children. And so, it's important that we reduce visual clutter on desks and walls wherever we can. Or we might even create a personal, clutter-free desk or workstation that autistic students can use during activities which don't require working in groups, but do require longer periods of concentration. We also need to manage light and noise levels in our classrooms. This means trying to avoid flashing lights and unexpected noises, or at least pre-warning children about them happening. We might also consider providing resources which protect students' senses, like a sensory tent or ear-defending headphones, which help them cope during busier activities and help them process the experience afterwards. Finally, there are lots of sensory checklists and sensory audit tools available online which help us review our learning space and consider changes that can ease the sensory processing demands they place on our young people. A third important aspect of creating autism-aware environments is to make them as predictable as possible. Students with autism are sometimes called mini-scientists, as they like their world to be predictable and repeatable. Increasing predictability usually results in decreasing worry and anxiety. So wherever we can help autistic learners by establishing consistent daily routines and sticking to them. We can also help students move through these routines and make transitions by using predictable countdown tools, for example sand timers, digital countdowns on a whiteboard, and especially music and songs which complement our visual approaches and further reduce anxiety if the music can give students happy feelings during transitions. Of course, life, and especially life in schools, is not always predictable. So what we can also do is to help children learn to cope with changes to routines. A great way of doing this is to develop a visual system that indicates a change to usual routines, for example an OOPS card on a visual timetable. We might want to practice using this card for pleasurable changes first. For example, oops, it's time to do something you enjoy, like going outside, which can help children make positive associations with their routines being changed. The fourth and final example of an autism-aware environment we have for you is to create obvious environments. By this, we mean making our instructions, rules, boundaries, expectations, and rewards as clear and explicit and obvious as possible. We want to avoid giving instructions which require students to interpret or guess what we mean. This includes avoiding assumptions that the student will understand typical social norms or figures of speech by saying things like, behave nicely, or pull your socks up. For autistic children and young people, it's much better to use simple and plain language. Rather than saying, don't hog the train, we could say, put the train down after you look at it. Wherever we can, we are trying to avoid assumptions about children's understanding of expected behaviour. Equally, we are trying to reduce the energy and effort that learners with ASC spend on interpreting the language of our classroom. This clarity is also important when we set rules and rewards. Again, we want the practices and standards of our primary school to be as clear and obvious as we can possibly make them. So, let's summarise by saying that when we use visual symbols alongside words and text, when we reduce distractions and unexpected sensory stimulation, when we make routines predictable and consistent, when we simplify rules and expectations, we are giving autistic young people the best possible chance to understand, concentrate, and make progress in our primary school. Thanks for listening, and I hope you found this video useful. If so, please check out the next video in this series, which covers useful primary school-aged activities to develop learning skills in young people with social communication difficulties.